Hello, everyone. Randy Harrington here. Uh, Tonight's video, I am doing an interview with my daughter, and she has put together a presentation about behaviors of indigenous tribes of humans found throughout the world and their behaviors, and how it correlates to the behaviors of Sasquatch or Bigfoot. And so that's what the subject is going to be about. But I want to pose to you a question, and you probably, gathered it from the title of this video. Isn't it time that we go ahead and just step back and say, hey, these are not animals. They never were animals. We chose to think of them as animals, and yet we have all of these questions about how are they staying so hidden, and communications. We want to poo-poo on the Sierra Sounds as being manufactured or faked or hoaxed, when clearly these things are talking amongst themselves. They have thought processes that are very human-like. I mean, they have to be. I mean, you can only deduct that from everything that we know so far. They have to be almost human or human-like or people-like, tribe, a wild tribe of people. Just because they can communicate, they choose nonverbal communications at times. We've heard vocal conversations, and it's not like a deer snorting or grunts. So you're gonna get your naysayers that are gonna come in and, well, other animals communicate with each other with just grunts and and noises and sounds, and but these things are communicating and talking and having conversations and teaching their young. To me, it's a no-brainer. So let's go ahead and follow that line of thought. And I've had some of my own experiences that told me way back in 2006 that these things
Family
must
members
talk
to
to
be
each other
found.
to make plans. Their tactics and maneuvering shows it. They position themselves to be tactically evasive and assist one another constantly. These are not happening by happenstance. They are determined and set up and discussed and planned, and it's amazing. So they deal with their family units. They seem to care for their young. I mean, unlike a deer cares for their young. Yes, you're going to make the comparisons, but I'm saying it is backed with an intelligence, an understanding that their actions have consequences, unlike other animals that live most of their life on instincts. Most of, I think, Bigfoot's behaviors or Sasquatch behaviors is learned. The fact that their young are born hairless and helpless and slow growth. Maybe it's certainly more accelerated than our growth, but it's certainly slower than a deer's growth or any other woodland animal in North America who becomes an adult within a year or so. So their growth is slow, and that tells me that they are having to be taught everything that they know. And you can't teach without communication, without a language. So that, let's just save that for another discussion, and let's just get into this discussion and talks about their elusiveness and their intelligence behind that. Thank you. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Good.
Good. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay. Okay. So you and I have had several conversations about reasons why Sasquatch has not been discovered. And of course, I wanted to put this together really kind of for myself as a way to reconcile, like, what are some of the reasons? Like, how can I understand this, knowing how much time and energy and effort that you put into what you do, and so many other researchers, like, why do we not have more evidence that these creatures are out there? So we've talked, about the political ramifications if Sasquatch were deemed real and all the federal regulations that would have to come about and all of these things that would happen. And that is its own separate thing. So just like taking that completely out, why else might they be hard for us to find them? So I've looked into just all the uncontacted indigenous tribes. I mean, that there are hundreds of new species being discovered every year. And there are still species that have been discovered, but are still really hard to find and research because they just continue to evade all of our efforts. So starting with the uncontacted indigenous tribes, there are more than 100 uncontacted tribes, and these are actual diurnal people living in the world that continue to elude contact with the Western world. So I guess when we think about the difficulty of finding and making contact with many of these indigenous tribes, they have become so adept at navigating their environment and remaining hidden, but still able to observe outsiders, which sounds very similar to how Sasquatch operates. Sasquatch, though, I think is on another level. So they're likely nocturnal if the reports of their eyes are accurate. And is that what you would believe as well?
From what we've seen so far, that would ring true, with their eyesight being what they see really well in the dark. So yeah, I mean, withholding anything scientific about, without any type of dissection of their eyes or anything, we can only go with what we've seen or experienced.
What's been reported. Yeah. So if those reports of their eyes are accurate, then it would make sense that they were nocturnal. So having larger eyes, nocturnal animals tend to have proportionately bigger eyes than humans do, and they tend to have pupils that open more widely in low light. So nocturnal eyes can gather more light than human eyes do. And they also have that mirror-like membrane at the back of their eyes that reflects light back. Um, this, of course, gives them a greater advantage of being able to function well in darkness and can observe humans and their surroundings and other non-human creatures, and would also explain their sensitivity to lights on cameras, film equipment, flashlights, game cams, all of those things. They'd be really sensitive to that.
Yeah, and you're describing things, say, like at nighttime. So like late in the day or early in the mornings when the sunlight is out, clearly they're out and about in those time frames also. So, but their eyes would be adapted to the sun being out. So things like, of
Mhm.
course, flashlights would be much more sensitive, and camera lights would be much more sensitive after dark to those eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. So thinking about just the immense number of tribes that are still out there, these are some of the better known tribes, but remain isolated, remain mostly uncontacted by the Western world.
Well, I
So,
would I would like to throw in to
mhm.
to to the people that are going to be watching this, that all of the tribes that Chelsea is going to mention are humans. So
Hmm.
we need to go ahead and get this out there that I know I believe from the 20 years of what I've seen and encountered that these things are lean in the direction of being like humans rather than an ape. So there's going to be some people out there who will be like, no way, no way, no way. But I'm about to interview a guy tomorrow. And so I don't know if I'm going to put the video before this one or after this one, but we're going to specifically talk about behaviors that he witnessed that he's struggled with for 35 years since he had his encounter that shows them tactically discussing things amongst themselves and moving around in positions that shows the intelligence of a human, not an animal.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. So, um, Peru houses Peru, Brazil, and Bolivia have like the highest concentration of uncontacted tribes on Earth. They are nomadic. There are several tribes there, and not a lot is known about them. What we do know is they have rejected contact, usually because of a result of horrible violence and diseases that have been brought in by outsiders. Um, I do have some notes. So some have chosen isolation after surviving the rubber boom, where thousands of indigenous people were enslaved and killed. And a lot of these indigenous folks fled to the deepest parts of the Amazon and have just remained uncontacted ever since. And on the rare occasions when they are seen or encountered, they make it really clear they want to be left alone, by acting aggressively as a way of defending their territory. They leave signs in the forest warning outsiders to stay away. Um, they tend to move throughout their territories according to the seasons, and they
Can I
live
make
in
can I want to make a statement on what you just said. You said
yeah,
that some of them leave signs as a warning, even if who they're warning doesn't understand that that's a warning. That's what, because they understand it as putting up a sign as a warning. It's kind of interesting because of course we're going to talk about tree structures and things and put up X's and things that people, I think people may understand them as being signs that Bigfoots are leaving. But what's interesting, you are are saying this in a way that they're leaving these warning signs with no full understanding that the people looking at these signs are going to read them as warning signs.
right, exactly. It is their way of communicating that this is, no trespassing, just as they may see a no trespassing Western sign and not have an understanding that this means don't walk on this land, but they might recognize that it is some kind of sign.
Right.
So, yeah. There's one of the tribes in Peru is the Mashco Puro, and they're hunter gatherers. And one of the things that they do is they quickly build camps and then just like abandon them. And they hunt animals, with long bows and arrows. That's pretty common, is using like much more, less advanced tools, for farming, for the hunters, and for gathering. Um, and again, they travel all throughout, which I they have their own territories, but they travel throughout these territories. And I think that is also in line with how Sasquatch seems to function too, that they have like their little families. And it sounds like, from what you have seen, or maybe from what others have reported, is it like more patriarchal or more matriarchal? What do you think?
Uh, it, from at I wouldn't have known this if it wasn't for all the experiences that we've had at the 400 location that me and Shane have spent the last 7 years at, and that would be a more matriarchal
Hmm.
influence on the family unit rather than a patriarchal. Uh, we could be wrong. We just know that most of the interactions we have are with juveniles and with the
Mhm.
mother close by. Hardly ever has any of the evidence so far shown us that the large male of the family unit is close by. He seems to leave it up to the mother to do all the forms of whatever education process is going on with those juveniles.
Which also makes sense when you think of how indigenous tribes operate, where the man is usually gone hunting, doing whatever he's doing during
Guarding,
it, right?
yeah.
Absolutely. Traversing the land, looking for new resources. And the mothers and the grandmothers are the ones who hold the units together.
Yep,
Interesting.
that's what it's showing for us too.
So, one of the other tribes, the first contact with the Madas in the Javari Valley didn't happen until 1978. And again, these are people who have been living on the land and we cannot access them. Um, a lot of contact wasn't made until the 80s with many of the isolated Peruvian tribes. And it's just fascinating to me that with all the advances in technology and all of this stuff that we have, that we still can't access these people. So that helps me kind of conceptualize like why it would be so challenging to find a creature like Sasquatch.
Yes, that makes
So
sense.
similarly, the Sentinelese in India, they're one of the most isolated tribes because they have their own island. So in 2006, there were two Indian fishermen who had like moored their boat near North Sentinel to sleep because they were poaching in the waters. And the Sentinelese killed them. Their boat broke loose and the tribe murdered them immediately. And then in 2018, there was an American missionary who traveled to the island to try to convert them to the American way, and was killed immediately. So pretty much anything that's known about them has just been gathered by viewing from boats really far away because they will shoot arrows. They're super protective of their land. But I think what's interesting, so in the late 1800s, there was a British officer who landed with a really large team on this island in the hope of contacting these people. So they've been around for ages. So they found like abandoned camps and paths, but they couldn't find the tribe. But after a few days, they came across an elderly couple and some children who, in the interest of science, they captured and took to their port, and they fell ill and died. So the children, they took the elderly couple died. So the children, they just took back to the island with like a bunch of gifts. Um, my guess is they all probably got sick, probably got the rest of the tribe sick because that is what this is an extremely isolated population and they do not have immunity for the diseases that we carry. So it's not known how many died as the result of this science, but it's likely the children would have passed that disease on. And when we think about how intergenerational trauma works, that experience may account for why the Sentinelese continue their hostility and rejection of outsiders because of this historical experience that has been passed on through generations. And it's my belief that Sasquatch could function similarly in that they likely pass on stories. I mean, if they have communication and they are able to give directions and all of these things, why would they not pass on stories and accounts of white man coming in and traumas regarding their interactions with humans, which could explain again their evasiveness.
Yeah, and I don't want you to lose your place, but I want to
Yeah,
interject some
you're
things
fine.
in here. Uh, so this particular island group, I don't know how big the island is. I'm assuming it was fairly large. Uh,
You don't
and
have to, yeah.
so we can't take this off the table that Bigfoots, I mean, and to call them Bigfoot or Sasquatch almost dehumanizes them, but whatever tribe these things are, or uh, I, I would think with all of the 911 books that are out there, certainly not every story within those 911 books or the 411 books, uh, which could be Bigfoot related. I would think that given what I think we know about their intellect now, that certainly some would choose violence
Mhm.
against encroachment. So that can't be off the table, as some of the 411 series would indicate. Maybe some of the kidnapping, some of the missing people may be Bigfoot related. That's certainly possible. Uh, but it's almost like they they choose, and when it comes to their immunity, the difference between an island that has lived on an island separate from people, Bigfoot's has been digging in our trash cans and touching
Mhm.
our doorknobs and
Mhm.
breathing our air and eating the remnants of things left in our trash can. So think of how many people have put snotty rags from a cold in a trash can that Bigfoot has dug through or whatever. So I would think that the ones on the continent probably have done a much better job of building up the same immunities that we've had built up ourselves just for being in closer contact to our refuse and stuff like that.
I would agree with that. And the point I was trying to make was not necessarily like illness or disease being a trauma passed on through Bigfoot, but human interaction that was negative
Yes.
those stories could be passed on. Or if, a Sasquatch was killed or hurt by a white man, then that, gets passed on to others, like to be wary and to pay attention and to notice, like when you see these other creatures come in, we avoid them or we attack
So
them.
so we need to just, I mean, this is definitely part of the discussion. Are they intelligent enough? Certainly, we think they are to have discussions about life amongst themselves. I proposed back in 2006 when I had my encounter at the Chickasaw Park. I would say this, but I mean, we're talking 20 years ago. And and it was so, even when I would say it and hear myself say it, I almost couldn't believe it. But what I heard that night showed that it was probably the case. When that little one was dragging a stick through the park and hitting all of those lantern posts, not once did that trigger the big one crossing the creek to come over to the campsite. But the moment that it hit the tree for the first and only time, the big one immediately sloshed through the creek and joined him. And I always said they had to have had a communication about what signals to give if you need me to come over and join you. And it only happened when it hit the tree. And that suggests that they had a conversation before the little one was going through the park looking in the trash cans for something to eat.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty amazing.
I know.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, everything that I've learned up to this point, I think they have discussions. They are experts at nonverbal communications, and they've chosen the nonverbal communications to as a to stay low key, to that we won't we'll hear a knock and not understand what it is because it blends in with the other forest sounds.
Mhm.
Clearly, they are communicating, and when they're far enough away from us, they communicate with their mouths and in voices and language. But
Mhm.
when they're in close proximity to us, they prefer nonverbal communications because of the subterfuge and the hidden aspects of it.
That could be part of it. And I think you and I had also had a brief conversation just talking about how a lot of other cultures and even primate species use a lot more nonverbal and hand gestures and all sorts of things way more than we do in the Western world. It's not as common, or we're seen as like weird if we use a lot of gestures and are motioning a lot, but that is more normal in other cultures. So a lot of the information about the uncontacted tribes I got from survivalinternational.org. It's a great website if anybody wants to learn more. There's a ton of information on there. So another way I kind of was like reconciling why do we not know more, or have a body, or all of these things, is just thinking about all of the new discoveries that are made every year. It would be the height of Western man's hubris to say without a shadow of a doubt that a Sasquatch does not exist simply because we haven't a body yet. There are still so many new species and creatures that are being discovered every year. And often many locals have knowledge of the land that the Western world does not. But because a Western scientist hasn't decided that this is real, then it's not real. But it's real to everybody else who lives there or who has experienced these creatures. Like a lot of indigenous tribes that are more westernized have reported on and accept that Sasquatch is real. They see them as another nomadic land living tribe. So a couple things. Researchers at the California Academy of Science and London's Natural History Museum uncovered hundreds of creatures and plants from the bottom of the ocean to an isolated peak in Angola. And this was a part of the almost 1,000 new species that were discovered just in 2023. Like there is still so much that we do not know about this world. In 2010, the Sundaland clouded leopard was caught on video at night in Malaysia, and they're extremely rare to see. They're super shy of humans, and it was just by chance that they even caught the cat on video. The Saola from Laos and Vietnam, none exist in captivity, and it's such a rare and secretive animal that it's called the Asian unicorn. Scientists have categorically documented the Saola only on 4 occasions. So this photo down here is from 2010 when some villagers finally captured one, and it died within just a few days of them capturing it. And then from Brazil, some scientists that were on an expedition exploring some areas of just Brazilian rainforest discovered a new species of monkey. And this was just in 2010, an entirely new species of monkey. I think, again, that there is so much out there that we don't know about.
I know it's
So
funny that you bring up the monkey species, because I remember just a few years back reading about a monkey that does not have a nose cover. It's just 2 holes. And they discovered those by when they were out in the rain in these forests, and they would hear them sneezing or water getting into their nose that you wouldn't hear any other time, not when it's not. And that's how elusive these things were. They weren't found until they could hear them in the rain because water was getting into their 2 nose holes.
Right. And there are so many, I think, examples of these unknown species being discovered by accident, by somebody who's just out doing something completely different, doing something else, and then all of a sudden they see this or hear this thing that nobody even knew existed. And I feel like there are a lot of accounts of people just out in the woods, and all of a sudden, like, they're not there for Sasquatch, but they have an experience that then they don't know how to explain. So a couple other ones, the Attenborough's long-beaked echidna, the colossal squid, and geese golden langur. So this one is interesting. I'm going to show this video. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay. So in 2023, the long-beaked echidna was finally caught on camera. And this is like the most bumbling platypus type burrowing creature. And it took, well, just watch this first. So look at this thing. It does not move fast. It just waddles around. It's not an aggressive creature. Like, it's just this thing. But what is interesting, let me go back to my PowerPoint here, is it took 80 trail cameras and 4 weeks of the team being in this forest just to finally capture some photographs of that thing. Before that, they spent 3.5 years planning and talking with the people of the land in order to get the knowledge to navigate the mountains and to research there. That isn't like to get that on camera, and we expect to just have a Sasquatch show up on camera like that. I think this is really what was like, okay, if we can't even do that, there, of course we don't have a Sasquatch on camera. I mean, come on.
So before they went into the 3.5 years of researching even a location to put out 80 cameras and spend months trying to get what they did get, it started out with people that live there saying, "Yeah, we've seen this little creature that waddles around with a long pointy nose." And
Mhm.
so it was just a story up to that point
Mhm.
until they could capture that.
Right. So on the same expedition, the research team did end up finding and capturing for the first time on video Mayer's honey eater, which is a bird that hadn't been seen since 2007. They also found an entirely new genus of ground and tree-dwelling shrimp, countless new species of insects, and a completely unexplored entire cave system that nobody had ever been in before. This was, I mean, this is insane to me that there again is so much out there, and this was just in 2023 that this was found. This was last year. So the colossal squid is another one. Despite the very limited knowledge around colossal squids, we generally don't deny that they exist the way we deny Sasquatch exists, even though we don't have a lot of information. Well, I feel like we have more information on Sasquatch really than we even do on the colossal squid. So it wasn't until 2016 that we even had a video of it. There are giant squid, which are much more prevalent, and then there's the colossal squid. And there are still no pictures of a living colossal squid. Very limited knowledge about them. And these things are massive, 46 feet, and we still can't find one of those.
Well, we need to throw this out there on the table that regardless of what evidence is out there, and if we want to talk about what people say their experiences are, mine included, when people say, "Man, I saw this," that was, when we're talking about Sasquatch encounters, you can't deny people's propensity to be dishonest, looking for attention, looking for not telling the truth about what they saw or experienced, or misinterpreting what they saw or experienced. That's a huge part of the veil that's been pulled over the Sasquatch arena, and that is people not being completely honest with themselves about what they experienced, or being deceptive, or just looking for attention. That fills this arena with people, and that
Mhm.
makes it difficult.
Absolutely. So the other one is geese golden langur. And this creature has bright golden fur. Again, it's this thing down here, like pretty recognizable, bright golden fur, and super hard to find. So in 1907, a hunter and forest ranger, claimed he saw this cream-colored langur, but didn't have a photograph or a live or dead specimen. Scattered reports of it. They live super high in the canopy. They're also diurnal, so they're up during the day, but they still are so difficult to access. And again, just thinking about the uncontacted Indigenous tribes and Sasquatch, like all of these things exist, and we can't deny just because we don't have a body that they are not there.
So
Because
people would say, man, so a golden langur, all they live up is in these high canopies. So why don't we find a dead body that has fallen to the ground?
right? Yeah, don't know. Don't know. But it always just makes me think about like the panda bear and the conversations we've had about that, and this big black and white bumbling bear that doesn't even run, doesn't move fast, eats only bamboo, and people were crazy for saying they saw this thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny.
So again, this was really like a project for myself to like reconcile outside of political ramifications, all of those other things. Why else might Sasquatch be difficult to find? But I think there are so many conversations that could be had about the amount of money and time and energy and resources that are spent to preserve the land of Indigenous people, uh, and forestry, logging companies, oil companies, all of that, who want access to these lands. And if Sasquatch were deemed real and had to become some kind of protected creature, what that would do to all of these money-making industries that want access to these lands that they live on.
So that would make it, that is an interesting point. Even if you were talking about animals that weren't trying to be as evasive and with intelligence behind it as these creatures seem to be. So put those two together, not only are they trying to stay hidden intelligently, you have possibly a forestry industry that wants to help them stay that way also. And they
Right.
lobby government, they lobby senators, and they lobby all these things to keep forestry lands open for money making jobs. So yeah, so you put all that together, and it's easy to keep this squashed. And it's easier just to say, to poo-poo on people saying that they have a sighting. That's much easier to keep brushing under the carpet until, of course, one ends up in the front end of a diesel truck stuck in the radiator pulling into a truck stop up in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, if something like that happens, and multiple people can see it, then it's going to be much harder to brush that under the rug. But when somebody just says, "Hey, I was out on Highway 101 and I saw one when I was riding my motorcycle," that's easy to poo-poo away and say, "Oh, you didn't see nothing. You're crazy or whatever. You're just being silly." But at some point, it's going to be hard to deny if, like I said, one comes in with a body in some way.
Right. Absolutely. Although I would not put it past our government to turn it into some kind of big hoax and make like essentially gaslight all of America
Right.
into thinking that it didn't happen. I would think that there's a lot that probably goes into all of this, which is why I was like, I can't, that's a whole separate
Rabbit hole. Yeah.
conversation.
Right. Right. No,
But
this is a great presentation. I mean, clearly, I mean, I've had to change my mind from my initial sighting to now after all of these experiences, and and kind of putting things together. And what what does this mean? Well, it compares to this, and this means something in itself, that there's an intelligence behind their, they are talking to one another, and they are having thought processes that are very human-like in their
Mm,
tactics, in their maneuverability, in their movements, in their evasive tactics. If we can't change our thinking when the evidence presents itself, then that's why we're not going to get any further along. But I'm telling you, they are showing me that they are quite capable
mm,
of
mm.
of intelligent thought and forethought, and knowing that their actions have consequences. And so, yeah,
Right.
it's
Which
amazing.
suggests much greater brain development, because that problem solving, that complex thought, that future thinking, that goal orientation, all of that takes place in the prefrontal cortex, which, I mean, doesn't develop in humans until about age 30. That's not fully developed. So
And
when
we're learning that they are in the process of teaching their youngsters in a
we,
way that the youngsters get caught more often because they're not disciplined yet. They're trying to learn how to be disciplined, and they're allowed certain freedoms within the range of our campsites according to the mother's comfortable. If she's comfortable with us, she allows them to have a little bit. It seems that way. I mean, I can't say that's for certain, but it seems like the mother is the one that is allowing what we're having happen out at the 400. So yeah, that means they're being taught, but at some point those youngsters move on, and we got two new little ones, so we no longer have a developing relationship with the youngsters we started with. And
mm,
that's kind of sad, because it's almost like you have to start over, but you really don't have to start over. You're starting over with the understanding that the mother is teaching them at a different beginning than the first two little youngsters we dealt with.
mm, yeah, that, I mean, you had that video about the little ones playing with stick, like digging holes. And that's pretty common among indigenous populations too, children using sticks, even older generations using sticks that they use to dig for in their garden, and just very primitive type tools that again, it just makes so much sense that if I think of them as a hairy tribe, that they are just a hairier version, a more primitive version of human. And I think, I mean, yeah, it's a matter of time before I think you guys get something really solid. So
I hope so. I hope so. I mean, I love the chase, but I also love that it gives me something to think about, and if we don't adapt what we think about, then we're just going to keep running around in circles. But yeah, I enjoy the fact that if we ever get past that point where we are communicating some way, I don't know how that's going to transpire to where they can understand, that we're trying to do this in a gentle way, not an aggressive. I mean, almost every story I've read in books about people that have encounters, they all end the same way, with gunshots being fired, with posses being gathered together and chasing and running through the woods trying to run them down. In the 1800s, every time one was seen, it's a wild man. Well, gather the pitchforks and the lanterns, and let's go after them. And they
right.
all end the same, and it's pitiful.
Mm-hmm. Right. And again, if those are the experiences that they're having with humans, who's to say that they're not going back and telling the rest of their group, like, this is what just happened to me. Stay away from them, and like teaching their young, like, you do not go near them. Or if you do, like, this is what you have to do. And like, I think that makes sense. And yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, very good. Very good. Well, my next, well, I don't, like I said, it may be my next video, or maybe before this. I don't know when I'm going to post this one comparative to when I do this other interview, but it's going to talk about behaviors that's important, that fits into what you're saying here. So I got to figure out how they're going to balance together. But but yeah, I'm really looking forward to where we're heading with these thought processes.
Absolutely. Yeah. I wish, just thinking about that research group that found the echidna and got that on film, it would be so amazing if you were able to spend a solid 30 days out, like on the 400, just like ingratiating yourself into the land and like becoming a part of it until you finally like they're just like, okay, he's just here now, like he's one of us now, and then they like bring you in. Would be amazing.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of things, and it all ties into time and funding. Well, we got no funding. Maybe maybe we'll have some money infused into this with this filming that we're doing. It hasn't happened yet, and who knows if and when it does happen, how that's going to transpire in could they fund us to spend a month out there? I don't know. And
Right.
could that be effective? It's, so far it's just been self-funded, and I don't mind. I would like to keep it that way because then I don't have to answer to anybody. I just do it the way I feel like it needs to be done, and that's always a good thing in my point of view, even if I'm wrong, because I'll learn if I'm wrong. Uh,
Right.
but uh, but still, I can't afford it. I can't afford to
Right.
spend. I can't take off work as much as I have in the past, and I can't afford the equipment. But but we're going to keep plugging along. So we'll see where that ends up.
Mm. Tell mom to buy a lottery ticket.
Well, yeah, we can't win the lottery if we're not buying tickets. We've got to at least buy the ticket. All right. Well, thank you so much. I love you.
I love you too.
All
Talk to
right.
you later.
Bye. Now, in this interview, Chelsea talked a moment about the membrane at the back of the animal's eye or the creature's eye for a nocturnal animal and how it reflects light. So, you might want to go back and watch a video that I just posted here recently uh, about 12 hours after Shane approached that little one in the field. He gives a vivid description of shining a light into its eyes and his description of the eyes and the reflective color of those eyes. So you might want to go back and check that video out just to reference what my daughter was talking about as far as the reflective nocturnal eyes.